Hello, and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest is Wayne Kamidoi, art director for the New York Times. My name is Neil Parekh, and I'm the executive producer and guest host for today's show. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We're also live in Sri's advanced social media group. We don't usually go live directly there. If you are watching there, make sure you click on the link at the top of the description to make sure that we can see your comments on the air. Please like, please comment, please share. Please let us know where you're watching from. We certainly want to welcome folks who are watching and encourage you to share this with your friends. Tag a friend in this. This is going to be a great show. We're going to give you a little preview in just a moment, but we're going to cover a lot of uh, features in today's show and look at some highlights from past editions of the Times. And Wayne will talk us through it. But before that, let's go ahead and show that a little preview of today's show. Welcome to Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Wayne Kamidoi, art director for the New York Times. Here's a quick preview of what we're going to have in today's show. We're going to feature the evolution of the front page of the Sunday Times. If you see here, the display story is actually a photograph from the Downtowns in America special. You see an article on cheap drones, etc. But as the day progressed, this front page evolved. There was a stampede in Korea, so you see how that photo it took prominence during the 4 o'clock edition, and the Downtowns in America moved further down. And then by 8 o'clock, you see that we have an article about the stampede as well. And then this is the 10:45 p.m. edition. Wayne will talk us through this to explain what happened. We'll also take a look at that Downtown in America special tabloid, a look at how downtowns are being revitalized. We'll take a look at the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, a special in the Metropolitan edition of the New York Times. This week also features the print-only New York Times for Kids. It's the Rotten issue. We'll also take a look at how the New York Times took online features. This is the Portrait of Justice, and put them into print. We'll show both the online and the print edition for both that and the election deniers special that they did. We'll also take a look at the COVID doctor, the Chinese doctor that tried to sound the alarm on COVID. We'll look at what they did online and what they did in print. We'll review several of their submissions to the Society of News Design, and we'll close with a special preview of the Thanksgiving issue. Wayne has been working on this. He's going to share. This is not in print yet, but we will share this at the end of our show. Thank you very much. That's a little preview of what's to come. We're certainly looking forward to a great show. As you saw, we're going to be looking at a lot of PDFs to show the design work, but we'll, of course, also look at the print edition of the Sunday Times. Let's take a quick round to see who's joining us. Diane Stefani is watching on a spin bike at the JCC in Margate. Diane, multitasking, be careful. Make sure that you pay attention. Obviously, you're not going to go anywhere on that bike. Abdul Rahman is watching from Egypt. Ahlan wa sahlan, Abdul Rahman. And a second fi Doi, Senatain. I lived in Doi for 2 years in Egypt, 2003 to 2005. I won't push any more Arabic on you. My wife, I can hear my wife laughing at my Hawaga Arabic, my foreigner Arabic in the other room. Deborah Kerr is watching from Asheville, North Carolina. Deborah, thank you very much. Patricia Freudenberg, always a pleasure to have you watching. Joining us on LinkedIn. Again, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Doug Levy is watching from San Francisco. Uh, and I'll mention it when Wayne comes on. But again, Doug joins us at 5:30 local time every week. Just incredible. I know, Doug, you say you get up early. This is what you do, but we still want to thank you and honor you for doing that. We're proud of everyone who gets up, even on the East Coast, waking up at in time to see the show at 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday. We so appreciate you spending your Sunday morning with us. Soumya Grover is watching. She's an intern with Digimentors, and she'll be helping out today, sitting in for Paula, dropping in links to articles in Facebook. So thank you, Soumya. Ken Fisher is watching from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Thank you, Ken. Always great to see you. Home of the Grant Wood Studio. Miriam Berkeley is watching from Hell's Kitchen, New York. Thank you, Miriam. We have other folks watching. Let's see. Ted Coltman is watching on YouTube. Thank you, Ted. And Ramnath is watching from Bangalore. Thank you, Ramnath. We have a great show planned, as I mentioned. And yes, Doug, this is your prime time. Thank you for sharing your prime time with us. Ramnath says it's 6 p.m. in India. So again, we do get a global audience from 5:30 Pacific time all the way to 6 p.m. in India. Our friend Stephen Kaplan is watching from Ramsey, New Jersey. Says hello to his New York Times family. And he won't be running into his friend Wayne at the market apparently this morning. He's going to run into his friend Wayne on the New York Times read along. Thank you. Ellen Austin is joining from the Upper East Side as well. I do want to give a shout out. I know there are a couple people watching on LinkedIn, or at least one person, and I'm sorry that we can't see your name and face. If you put your name in the comment, at least we'll know who's watching, but we do know they're watching from Somers, New York. Sometimes LinkedIn and Facebook get glitchy and they don't show the name and face. When I comment on the show myself, it doesn't show my name and face on Facebook. So not quite sure what's going on there. But again, thank you very much for joining us. Please, as I said earlier, please like, please comment, please share. Please remember to tell us where you're watching from if you joined us late. Our guest is Wayne Kamidoi, and I'm going to go ahead and bring Wayne on in just a moment. Again, Wayne Kamidoi is the art director for the New York Times, and we're going to bring Wayne on and show the newspaper at the same time. Wayne, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Neil. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to Doug, that's a very early morning.
That's an early morning. Absolutely. We always appreciate it when folks join. And he's not the only one. We have several people who watch the show in California before they get the print edition. It gives them a preview of what's to come.
I remember watching my good friend John Branch, who's out in California, and be on your show. So he was...
Yeah,
it was early for him, but
early for our guests.
Great to hear from John.
Absolutely, thank you. So what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at the front page of the New York Times. Take a look at the various sections, just to give a quick preview, and then we'll come back. We'll chat with you for a little bit, but then we'll really dig into some of the special sections and some of the special features that you shared with us. So I'll go ahead and take myself off and turn over to our newspaper. What I always find interesting when there's a full page ad, there's an 8-page pullout. This is for Christie's that wraps around the whole paper. So we want to make sure to show that to folks. And then we have the front page of the New York Times. We will go take a deep dive in terms of how this front page evolved. But for now, you can see that there's a display photo of this massive stampede in Seoul, Korea. And we have a lead story. The midterms offer a clash of visions over the U.S. future. There's an article about Russians block Ukrainian grain, cheap drones and Western weapons turn tide. And then below the fold is, and this is a reefer, right, Wayne?
Yes, that's. I'll throw out some design terms.
Please.
That is called a floater in
A
New York
floater.
Times, which is a photo that refers to a story either in another section or inside the paper.
Good. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it. So what's the difference between so that's a floater? What's a reefer?
Though a reefer would
In
be
New
one
York
of those
Times parlance.
at the bottom of the page. One of those just usually just words at the bottom of the page, a
Got it.
headline teasing to an
Down here.
article. Yeah.
Great. There's also an article about suicide attempts amid cruelty in Louisiana juvenile detention, and an army of volunteer sleuths hunts down Portland stolen cars. So we'll definitely get back to the front page. As I said, we'll take a look at the evolution of today's front page. Here is that special Downtowns in America tabloid. So you can see it's a slightly different shape, and it's also a wraparound cover. You can see the backside. This is actually a picture of Seattle, where I lived for 15 years, on the cover. Excuse me. But we'll take a close look at that. And then this is the kids edition. It's a special monthly, end of the month, print only special section. We actually had Amber Williams on the show back in June, which was incredible. She's the editor of New York Times for Kids. So this is the rotten issue. We'll show you the bottom half of that. It's a big bug. We'll definitely spend some time with the kids issue later this morning. Sunday Styles, the cover, Ryan Murphy rises again. TV's mad genius of Grand Guignol tightens his grip on our cravings by Maureen Dowd. So there's the rest of that picture. Sunday Opinion focuses on climate, where my climate doubts began to melt. A trip to Greenland changed my mind about climate change, but reinforced my belief that markets, not government, provide the cure. That's by Brett Stevens. We'll get to the Times Magazine, but the Times Magazine is a special climate issue this week. Here is Sunday Business. And what's always interesting when you look above the fold, it's hard to tell what that story is about. There's no text above the fold. You have to flip it over. The party's over, startups. As Silicon Valley's unbridled euphoria runs into economic reality, techies try to adjust. And then there's also a story, it's feast or famine for America's port drivers. Set that aside. We have Arts and Leisure for Henry Taylor, Attention Paid. His new show in Los Angeles speaks to the struggle of Black artists to obtain a level of recognition that is long overdue. And then you see what the bottom of that page looks like. There's a special advertising supplement to the New York Times, Watch Your Time, Fine Watches Magazine. So that's an interesting, I haven't seen a special magazine advertising insert like this in a while. So we'll set that aside as well. Here's the New York Times Magazine special climate issue. It says that on the top of the climate issue. The New World, Envisioning a Future After Climate Change. And we have the book review, Like the Dickens. Barbara Kingsolver reimagines David Copperfield in Appalachia. So that is just the preview of what's to come with the print edition. And we'll set the Christie's ad aside for the moment. Before we dig into the paper and the front page, Wayne, I just want to take a quick moment. And again, thank you for joining us. Give us a little bit of background in terms of how you came to the Times and what your evolution was. You worked on newspapers in college, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it all got started. I walked in my first day of college at Central Michigan University, and of course, my older sister Kathy was there as a student and knew quite a few people at the newspaper, so she sort of facilitated it. And then I went in with the goal, I wanted to be a sports writer and cover a pro team or a college team, be on a beat. And from there, I covered a lot of the college teams, including the men's basketball team, traveled with the teams. It was great. And then just did it all. Did in the end, edited, wrote, designed the paper. And so that was kind of the start of getting interested in design. And a good friend of mine, Ken McDonald, and I read as part of kind of a job application to become the editor-in-chief of the school paper. We proposed a redesign of the student paper. So I got my start there and became editor-in-chief my senior year, and that was always a thing. I just like to do the design and editing, even though I do not have an art background at all. So any newspaper at the time were interested in designers. So anyone who could lay out the paper at the time, there really wasn't a lot of news designers out there. They were usually editors who then were stuck with the burden of laying out the paper. And then I worked at my hometown paper daily. In my first job, I worked there for a year in Port Huron, Michigan. And then from there, I moved on to the Detroit Free Press, which was a paper I would have wanted to cover, let's say, my team, the Detroit Tigers or Detroit Red Wings. But I went there as a news designer. They started a design desk. It was a new thing at the paper, and they just hired 4 designers. And we were doing news design, but they had never had that before. So it was sort of a pioneering thing. And it sort of became a model that most newspapers now have design desks. Most daily papers, or especially, back in the 90s when I started my career, it's sort of changed since then. And then I spent 7 years there. And then in 95, actually November 1st, 1995 is my anniversary date at the New York Times.
On Tuesday,
27 years.
27 years. So tell us, what do you do as the art director for the New York Times?
Well, currently my job is to, work within the news sections, although sometimes I go outside with, as you mentioned, with the dining section and the Thanksgiving Pano section or the cooking group. But mostly it's for news, breaking news design, enterprise. And I've been doing that for about 7 years, along within our print hub, which we can talk about more. It's a staff that is dedicated to the print newspaper. So we have a very dedicated group of designers, editors who produce our print edition every day. And before that, I was for 20-ish years, I really was in the sports department and was one of the designers in the sports department. Hope I can't hear you, Neil.
Sorry about that. I do want to welcome a few folks who joined us a little bit later. Doug Levy does mention that he used to work morning drive radio. So this early hour is an old good habit. I need to do a special shout out to my mom. She's watching, just about to leave for the airport. So my mom watches every week. Thank you, Mom. I always say, hi, Mom. But today she's going to India, and she's going to be watching on the way to the airport. Next week, she'll be watching from India. One day, I remember she actually landed at like 8:30 or so in New York coming back, and watched in the car coming home after an international trip. So I can't say enough about how loyal a viewer my mom is. Thank you, Mom. Wayne, Stefan says Wayne is so ultra talented and has accomplished so many amazing things over a stellar and long New York Times career. You have your own big fan.
Well, Stefan's my neighbor. He's
your neighbor. So
one town north.
He has to say it.
And I'll plug Stefan too, because
please.
If you follow him on Instagram, Spin It Social, I won't take any photos of the fall leaves are coming out. And he also does a lot of nature photography, and he posts it, but I'm not posting anything on my account because his are so good.
His are They are good. And if you want to give a plug, check out his page. I know that he is selling prints for the holidays, so folks can check that out on Facebook and on Instagram. He also has these great videos of geese in the neighborhood, and some bears were visiting recently as well. He does say, "I'm always in awe of Wayne and colleagues as they continue to take things to new heights, layout and design-wise. It was always an honor and a pleasure to have worked together, but it's Wayne's kindness and professionalism that stands above all." High praise indeed. Stefan was a photo editor at the New York Times for a number of
I have
years.
to get Stefan lunch or something at the grocery store when I bump into him. Sometimes I have done that.
Jay Palaki is watching from Maryland. We have someone watching from Connecticut. I wonder if it might be our friend Rose Horowitz. Sorry that we're not seeing your name and picture, but Rose, if that's you, let us know in the comments. Debbie Bernick is watching from, she says DC, but I know she lives in Arlington, Virginia, not far from me. She is one of my daughter Emily's most loyal Girl Scout cookie customers. So as Emily will be selling Girl Scout cookies again this fall. We'll certainly let you know when that starts. Ron Thomas is watching from Dubai. Ron is a former guest. Thank you, Ron. Mark Lee is watching from Durham, North Carolina. Mark, good to have you. I don't think I've seen you in a while. And yes, my mom is a dedicated fan. Linda Lawrence is watching from Long Island. Thank you, Linda. Always great to have you join the show. Doug does ask a question, and we don't necessarily have to answer this now, but we can keep this in mind as we look at the various packages. He's curious about how early do you get involved in the creation of big packages. So when we talk about different features, if you can share a little bit about that process, that would be great. So let's go ahead and jump in, Wayne. We talked about the front page of today's issue and how that evolved over time. So this is the Bulldog edition. I'll make it a little bit bigger for folks to see, what's above the fold.
That one might not be the Bulldog. That one's
this is the end. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the Bulldog right here. There's the Bulldog.
Okay, called the Bulldog for a long time. I forget why, but that's our first edition on Sunday.
What time does that come out?
We have to close that, or we have to typeset all the stories by noon on Saturday. And so that was an issue that was definitely when I was in New York City, that would be able to be on the subway platforms. You could see it like at 5 p.m., 4 p.m. Wow. They were already selling them. So I used to work on Saturday mornings, put that first edition of the sports out, and I could take a break, walk down to the subway or a bodega, and that paper would be there.
Doug says Bulldogs always want to be first. Maybe that's the evolution of the term. So this was the first edition, and
right.
It includes.
So that's getting planned out. Friday night, most of it is done. That's the plan. So they're mapping this out. Starting, discussions start on Wednesday about what the story selection is going to be, and then it gets really intense on Friday nights. They're trying to get as much done because, as you can see, it's a big paper. But obviously, the thought here before news broke was referring to the downtown section.
That display image here.
Right.
And then other stories that were on the front page: races tighten in final sprint to lead states. Biden's agenda at risk. If GOP takes Congress. There's also this article: Twitter pivot. People's tool is Titan's toy. About Elon Musk taking over. And then there was also a picture that went with the cheap drones and Western weapons turn tide article. You see this image at the bottom. You have the Louisiana juvenile detention story. and the volunteer sleuths hunting down Portland's stolen cars. But as the day evolved, things changed. So this is the 4 p.m. edition. We see the image of the stampede in Seoul, Korea. So walk us through this. How did this come to pass?
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure when we would have found out that this was happening, and whether it was between 12 and before this edition closed around 4. But one of the reasons there's not, it's obviously a significant story, and the reason why there probably is not a story on the page, there is a story in the newspaper. But what happens when something breaks like this, there's a lot of dominoes that fall. Once you put a story, or let's say there is breaking news, it creates issues with the inside pages that then have to be changed to accommodate whatever breaking news is happening. So there had to be a plan. Okay, so we have this story. Where are we going to put that story? Are we going to put it on A1? Well, we can't. We might not have enough time, but we have a spot on, is it page 9? And so we will put it there. Whatever copy that we have, it's probably going to be rewritten throughout the day as developments happen. So that, from a production standpoint, was the reason why for this edition, just because of the timing, we got the big photo on A1 lead image. But the story is important, but because of the time conflict and production deadlines, the story was in the paper, but not able to get on A1, because once you put it on A1, then you have to find a spot, how to get the other stories to fit, and there's just a lot of issues when things change, especially this quickly.
So there are no change to the lead stories here.
Right.
There's a new story, Russians block Ukrainian grain. I don't believe that was in on the early Bulldog edition. And then you see that the photo for the Downtowns in America story replaced the photo that was with the cheap drones image.
Yep. So that was the next move, would have been, okay, what do we do with that photo? Mm-hmm. We want to promote that tabloid, but let's just not get rid of it if we can. So that move would have been to get rid of that photo, but not touch the text above it.
Yes.
Because then that wouldn't have to facilitate another big change on another page.
Sure. Inside.
So that was the most efficient way to do it.
Just swapping.
While they're doing this, while this is in motion, someone's already thinking about, okay, the next edition, I believe, is 8 o'clock. How are we going to make this all happen? If that story goes to if the Korea story goes to A1, how are we going to make that fit? And we're going to bump that one story. I believe, I'm not sure which one moved inside, but then that one has to change on the
Racist Titan. So replace the Racist Titan story.
Right.
And it took up the same space there. Nothing else changed in terms of the photography and the drones, Ukrainian grain. And then the final version, it looks like it stayed the same, just updating the headline on the stampede.
I mean, sometimes if more photos, and I'm sure many more did move in, if it were better, then we have a picture editor who then consults with the editors and the designer and say, what can we do if we want to just substitute or sub, as we call it, a new photo, update it. But it looks like, this one sort of tells the story, and everyone was happy with the original selection.
Sure.
But as the day goes on, editors are looking for, are there better images? Is there something else that can tell the story better from a photography standpoint?
Ron says this show is always educational, a must watch for him. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that. Hopefully folks are appreciate this inside look at the Times. We don't usually get to see how the front page, we share the front page, obviously, but we don't usually get to see this evolution with the various editions. Stefan says all teachers should be sharing this, and every New York Times read along. with their students. Thank you, Stefan. Uh, whether it's high school or even hopefully some journalism students would benefit from watching the show.
Well, if you were able to luckily save the kids edition from September, that was an amazing one on how to basically create your own student newspaper, start one, or how to create one. And it went by step, and a lot of those steps that they were describing in the kids section are pretty much what the rules that we follow at any paper.
There were some good templates that they shared in that edition. We did actually show it on the read along that day. It was really good. I definitely remember spending some time with it.
Yeah, I loved it.
And Deborah asks, when does the kids newspaper come out? It comes out the last Sunday of the month, Deborah. So we do have the print edition for this week's version, and it is available on our website until noon. We'll get to it a little bit later, but if you want to get it from our website, you can download it before noon today. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the paper. We will look at the front page. We looked at the front page already, but we'll look at the A section, and then we'll dive into some of the special features that we have. And Stefan is commenting, it's certainly such a horrific tragedy in Seoul, South Korea. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the newspaper. Inside the A section, as we open it up, and right off the bat, I'll just share, I always find it interesting. Wayne, I know in College Point, they can print up to 40 some odd pages, 41 pages at
Correct.
the printing press, but around the country, there are, I think, 27 other printing presses that you use in partnership with other newspapers, the Washington Post here in DC, the Seattle Times, etc. Other presses can't print 41 pages. In the Washington Post can cover 28. So I always find it interesting that the continuation of the A section, rather, is it called the A book? Is that what you call it?
The A book, yes.
A book. When you're flipping through, this is like a natural. This highlights this first page that's in the second section. I used to think it was intentional in terms of where that break happened, but if I'm just looking through casually, I may flip through this and it'll draw my attention to this obit. Sometimes it's it's an interesting story that you may not have seen otherwise.
It's a little awkward sometimes, and you can try to plan to put a prominent story on that page of the second A book. That's what we informally call it. But we kind of feel like it's just a continuation of the A book, even though it looks like a section front. But yeah,
Sure.
That's really a limitation of some of the presses that can't do the really thick one section.
But you do sometimes try and plan for that second A book?
If it can fall that way. I mean,
Great.
There's a lot of discussion. If, I can get into the weeds a little bit about Sunday paper is a tough one because there's a lot of ads and they're usually in color. And sometimes we're limited with the number of color positions in the paper. And also we like to do 2-page layouts of, enterprise stories. And sometimes that's difficult to get because most of the ads are sort of targeted for the right-hand page because that gets the best viewership. So the advertisers are asking for the right-hand page. So if they're doing single pages, you go through the paper, you'll just see a color ad on page 5, on page 7, so it limits the ability to have 2 open pages together in the Sunday paper. I mean, it's a good thing we're getting ads, but sometimes we'll say like, well, we can't get color because there's just too many ads in the A section. Neil, are you muted?
Apologize for that, Wayne. I'm
Okay.
muting myself occasionally because I'm coughing, so I'm trying not to cough in everyone's ears. I was saying that it's certainly not a failing newspaper, especially with all the ad revenue that's coming in.
And we're getting into the holiday season, and we've already been kind of told, the color positions in Sunday are only going to get slimmer
Sure.
because that's sort of peak advertising season. But
So
if it's a big project, we just have to work through the logistics, and sometimes we can get that to happen, especially if it's a very enterprising story that cries out to have color.
Ken Fisher is saying this is a really fun New York Times read along. He wrote features at 2 different high schools a million years ago and did the layouts, so he can appreciate some of the challenges that you're facing. Um, and Rose Horowitz is watching from Connecticut. Rose, so glad that you are able to join us today. Um, the Inside the Times is my favorite piece in the newspaper. It's on page 2. It's the story behind the story. And this one talks about the Downtowns in America piece that we'll be taking a look at a little bit later. The article is by John Otis. Um, what you said you had taken a look at this earlier. What stood out for you from this article?
Well, I had spoken to Andrea Zagata, who was one of the designers on it, along with Carrie Mifsud, and she had just mentioned how it came to be, and this article sort of details that and how it was sort of an idea with 2 national editors, Megan Ludet, who used to be in Metro, and I worked with her on several, photo projects similar to this, where she was the digital, really like the lead uh, director for that section, has moved to national, and so this sort of feels like a similar where we go around the country and it's a photo driven package, and it was presented, and as Andrea said, the tabloid format seemed to was a natural fit for this to highlight the photography, and then there's words to go with it, but it's really like a photo book, and we kind of started that back with the Metro section a few years ago, with the New York City parks, and then that was with the archive team, and then we did the block parties around New York City, where we just
Sure.
sent an army of photographers basically out to all the boroughs to capture all the different block parties around New York City that are just kind of unique depending on the borough. And then this sort of fell into sending 10 photographers out to 10 different downtowns around the country.
And we'll take a closer look at that section in just a bit. Page 2 is always interesting. Again, this is only available in the print edition. You have several noteworthy facts of interest, kind of teasing various sections of the paper. This looks at a tour of the New World in the magazine. In all its industrial history, Pakistan has contributed only as much carbon to the atmosphere as the United States does each and every year. For example, that's in the climate issue of the magazine. And from the New York Times for Kids, they worked in surströmming, a fermented herring popular in Sweden, has such a strong odor that some airlines have banned people from bringing it on flights. Funky foods in the New York Times for Kids, page 5. So an interesting approach there. There's also at the bottom of the page, and I'll fold it and bring this up. We always like to point out the service journalism that the Times does. Here to help, and this ties in with several of the features: how to protect your home from climate change, advocate for community improvements, make sure sidewalks, curbs, and storm drains are clear of debris, inspect your property. If your living space is susceptible to flooding by furniture with metal legs, when making home improvements, consider ceramic tile floors and cement board instead of drywall, and consider installing French drains. So that's interesting. And the quote of the day: "It will be Stalingrad in winter for them." A Ukrainian officer on Russian troops who are dug in outside Kherson, but exposed to weather and largely cut off from supply lines. This headline from history in the bottom left corner: It's Clay wins pro debut. You might be wondering who they're referring to when they say Clay. It's from October 30th, 1960. Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, engaged in his first professional bout after winning gold at the Rome Olympics the previous month. That was this day in history. So let's take a look at the rest of the A-book, and then we'll get to the downtown section and other specials. The international story, where Halloween was taboo, ghosts and ghouls abound. This is a Saudi Arabia dispatch. Interesting. This is what I love about the print edition, Wayne, and going through this. I wouldn't have come across this story otherwise, but it's serendipity. If you're just flipping through the paper, you see a headline, see some interesting pictures. I'll want to go back and read this, having lived in Egypt for 2 years and only seeing things like Halloween celebrated by the expat community and at the embassy. But this looks like it's spreading just a little bit more.
Well, I work at the paper and, dive into the digital probably more than most people.
Yeah.
And there's so much content on our digital site that things get lost, and then I'll see it in paper. I'm like, I never saw this on digital, just because there's so much content, or you miss the window of when it was posted and had some prominence, and then it's hard to find.
Sure.
And that's the great thing about the paper is we can't get everything in, but we try to curate it to get the best of the digital in there, including video, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in some of these interactives that you would think don't suit themselves to a static print edition that doesn't have motion. But
we're flipping through the international section, several pages of international stories, including here's the drone story from the front page. Cheap drones and advanced Western weapons turn tide. Now, here's an interesting thing I just noticed, and I'm going back to the front page. The headline on the front page, cheap drones and Western weapons turn tide, is the same as the headline on the Jump. Usually what I've seen is, of course, a shorter headline on the front page, a little bit more detail on the Jump, and it's the headline on the Jump that is usually the headline on the online version of the story. Any insights or thoughts on that?
That goes back and forth. I mean, sometimes the digital head is very good, so we like to pick that same head up in print, but sometimes it's more aimed at a digital audience, and so it doesn't quite resonate in print. But also the trick of a copy editor who writes the editors who write the headlines, they have to sort of also fit the specifications that are in the design or pages that we design. For instance, that headline, if it were one column wide, it's not gonna fit. So they have to come up with different wording. But in this case, it's a wide headline, and it happened to be able to mimic the A1 head, which I think sometimes you want that sort of connection on the stories, whether it's exactly the same or slightly different. So I think that a lot of things sort of have to be in place to get the same headline, but that's not always the goal. Sometimes something could be posted on digital and, something in print, you got a different set of editors. They might feel that that just may need to be worded differently.
Stefan says, long live print. We certainly hope that print lives for a long, long time. Miriam is asking, is there a way to see the print layout with a digital subscription? Miriam, there is. If you go to today's paper, at least for the front page, you can see what the front page looks like. If you go to today's paper on the top left of the homepage, you can see that. There is also a replica. It's kind of an edition. You don't get the full layout of every page, but you get a sense of what the pages look like when you follow that. Miriam also had a question. She had a photo in the paper recently, an obituary photo, which was originally in color and appeared in color online, but in black and white in print. She checked the tear sheet and it was on page 10. Now she understands why it was not in color. So Wayne, thank you for
Well,
the
you know,
education.
another weird thing about that,
Yeah.
Miriam and Neil, sometimes the same story on the same page could be in color in the city, but black and white in the national edition, or vice versa, because of ad positioning,
Interesting.
size of the section. Um, so sometimes we actually do layouts where it's color in the city and black and white in the national, and it's usually like black and white in the national, but not in Houston or some press site that just can't handle the volume of color. They have their own limitations.
Do you have to do different layouts for different presses, or do they just?
Well, there's a conversion to black and white, but sometimes that's not the greatest. So sometimes what we'll do, especially with graphics, they'll have to do a black and white version and color version. And because sometimes if you're dealing with gray tones, they might not read in that conversion. So what we'll do is just place a black and white graphic, and we'll send photos in both color and black and white, because the toning sometimes isn't as great or in the conversion. So if we want it to look better, we'll get it toned by our art production department. And that's a department that takes photographs and makes them, they tone them not for, let's say, your wall to look good. They know the specifications to make it look as good as it can in the newspaper based on the inking and the qual. Just they know the settings to make
Sure.
that look right.
Sure. Ron Thomas is commenting on the Halloween article in Saudi Arabia, saying when he lived there, you could not even celebrate Valentine's Day. This was 6 years ago. So thank you for that that perspective, Ron. Mark Lee is saying, so glad festivals and block parties are back. Went to Barktober here in Durham, a somewhat block party for community and dog owners. So people are starting to come out a little bit, which is interesting. I will say that as a personal note, we're not done with COVID just yet. It is certainly still spreading. People do need to be careful. We're still wearing masks indoors. We went out. We went to a restaurant the other day for lunch, hoping we could eat outside, and they didn't have seating anymore outside, so we brought it home. So I have several relatives who have recently been diagnosed with COVID, older relatives. So still need to be careful. Still need to be careful out there.
Yes, our oldest is a sophomore at University of Michigan, and she had had avoided it for this long, and kind of missed about a week of classes
Wow.
last month.
Wow.
So it was spreading around, but thanks to vaccines and
boosters.
Boosters, it was not a severe case, and back to normal.
Sure. Miriam says, very interesting to hear about the toning in black and white, and thanks you for that. Stefan, the world needs more copy editors. Absolutely. We certainly support copy editors on the read along. Let's get back to the rest of the paper and see what we have there. In addition to the more articles about Ukraine and Russia in the international section, so several pages of international coverage. Then we get into some U.S. coverage, generations endured in Kentucky, then floods, a nice full page, and photographs by Jared Hamilton. This photo credit, I haven't seen it displayed like that in the past. Usually you'd see it under each photo, but they have the almost like a pull quote, photographs by Jared Hamilton for the New York Times.
Usually we do that for, if it's one photographer and it was an enterprising project that they have followed, and it sort of equates to the amount of time and effort put into it. So this was a pretty special package. It has more photos online. And this is one I designed this page, and
Oh yeah.
it was one because of space. This one probably could have been more than one page, but we didn't have the space. But you try to make, just with anything, you try to make the best with the space that's allotted. And so I worked with the picture editor on the selections, because there were just a lot more photos available. But then if we could only run 7 pictures, what's the best mix that we could do?
Sure.
And so he went through, and picture editors they have a digital edit and then a print edit, because they know that we're generally, with these enterprising pieces, we're not going to get all the photographs that are on digital in print. So they sort of make a second edit that's more geared toward print.
Interesting. A second edit more geared toward print. Here's the centerfold, and we always like paying attention to the ads. This is a ad, Women Life Freedom. There's a website at the bottom. I'll show that. Women Life Freedom Today, brought to you by Vital Voices Global Partnership. So big text on the left. So it looks like some Arabic text, or it's Iranian. Let's see here. As a global collective of women and allies, we demand action. Signed this open letter urging the United Nations member states to heed the call of Iranian women and remove the Islamic Republic of Iran from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Certainly with the protest and the deaths of women in Iran recently. And you'll see signed in solidarity by several A-listers, including Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Hillary Rodham Clinton. There is Oprah Winfrey, Alice Walker, and a few others on this list. Moving on, here's the story from the front page about volunteers searching Portland to recover stolen cars. That Elon Musk story, with Twitter staff set to get stock grants, Musk is said to have ordered job cuts. And here's the pivot for Twitter. This is on the bottom of the fold, below the fold rather. Pivot for Twitter: the people's tool has now become a mogul's toy. That went from a front page story in the Bulldog edition to where are we? We're on page 16 later in the day. We have
so that page may have had to undergo some design change to try to accommodate the extra type that was coming off of A1 into this package. But I like the way it doesn't look that way, because it was done with some finesse, and the way that illustration works with the text is very well done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have several more pages. The midterm elections, an article about MTA riders' gripes. That's a big issue in New York, Metropolitan Transit Authority. This is an article about the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband. Someone was targeting Speaker Pelosi in that hammer attack. The Neediest Cases Fund. And then here's an interesting repeated abuses at detention center with powerful allies. It says from page 1. I don't remember the story. This is from Louisiana. Suicide attempts amid cruelty in Louisiana juvenile detention. And so this is a full 2-page story inside, a big dominant photo, a lot of text. This is really interesting. Inside, I
believe it's 4 pages. It's 4 pages.
Is it right? Continue? You're right. It is 4 pages inside.
So Andrea also worked on this package, and talking about lead time. I believe this story has been in the works for a long time, and it's kind of been brewing. About it, but then it really, with most of these packages, no matter how long you've been working on it, it always comes down to the crunch time of when it actually publishes. So I know this has kind of been in the works, and she's been working on it, and then there was some last minute changes, but she made it look like this was the whole plan and everything worked out. And for a difficult story like that, it's hard to, get the mood and of the digital product or the digital presentation into print. And I think some of the elements from digital were pulled to print to make it look very nice and in black and white.
Sure. Stefan says the constant and never-ending battle for space in print, it only gets more and more difficult around the holidays. Miriam is asking, are the Kentucky photos in color online since they're in black and white in the paper? How would a print reader know? I don't think they would know what.
The Kentucky photos, no, those were actually shot in black and white.
They're shot in black and white. Interesting. Yeah. Debbie points out it was Farsi, the in Arabic script. She taught girls in Iran in the 70s. Very interesting, Debbie. Thank you. We do want to spend some time with the special print sections. So we want to turn our attention to the Downtown in America section. And then we'll turn our attention to the New York Times for Kids after that. So meet me downtown. After decades of transformation and the pandemic's upheaval, the beating heart of the American city is climbing back to vibrancy. And again, this is a special section, tabloid size, easy to read. Meet me downtown, a little table of contents on the inside page. Nampa, Idaho, Lexington, Kentucky, Hartford, Connecticut, Salt Lake City, Mountain View, Arkansas, Austin, Texas, Peoria, Arizona, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Seattle, with the photo credits down the middle and then the pages on the right.
I'll give a shout out to Andrea, who said she wrote the headline for the section downtown, which I encouraged other designers to do that because think about it, because it gives you a chance to think of the overall concept and what you're trying to get across. And sometimes that front page headline gets other people to start buying into your concept or feeding into it and making it better. Or it lets someone else who's sometimes better with words, and I will say the editors at times, word editors are a lot better, to write a better headline based on your headline, or it sparks some thought in there, like, hey, what if we did it just a little differently and it's better?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to do that, but Andrea must have put that down on her sketches, and then it lived to get into print.
Kudos to Andrea. The what I'll call the MuckRack here, reporters and photographers from the New York Times visited 10 cities across the country to examine how the pandemic and its aftershocks have tested and reshaped America's downtowns. While we flip through this, explain a little bit about what we're looking at, some of the process, how long maybe, do you know how long this was in process for?
I would say I don't want to speak for Andrea and Carrie, but I believe this was in the works for a long time, and at the beginning it's just hey, we're sending 10 photographers for 10 different downtowns. And that may have been 2 months ago or something, just the talk of the concept before the execution. But it's something that's good that we, as a print hub, since that started, we start to get involved a little bit more earlier in the process than we used to, so we can plan it out. Like, hey, this is great. Instead of just putting it in the A book, let's put it in a tabloid or a broadsheet special section. What's the best format for this? So we can discuss, as the digital production's going on, what's the print presentation going to be like? And I think we've done a better job. We definitely have done a better job of getting involved in the conversation of how these big enterprise projects are going to look in print.
It definitely makes a difference. It's easy to flip through. These aren't captions on the photographs. There's some photo credits, but the text on the page kind of generally refers to all the photos.
Yeah, I think this is, it's a departure from what we usually do with captioning of photos, where you identify the people specifically in the photos. But I think in this case, and we've done it on other sections, where the captions are more, hey, look at the photos, what do they globally overall say, and without getting too into the details of who the people are, but it can give you enough information of what you're seeing in these two photos or photo on a page.
This is a piece about Washington, D.C. It became a ghost town, is the general headline. Tourists and office workers have started to return to the heart of the nation's capital, but as pandemic restrictions ease, the streets are subdued. Here, new apartments are going up along the waterfront, and then on to Chicago.
I mean, one thing you'll see from a design standpoint that's great about this, and what we try to do in other thematic sections, is that there's a clear break of each city, and they all look the same typographically, with the small label of the section plus the quote. But then within the photo layouts, you get a variety. It's not the same. Like, there's a variety in the size, shape, in the way they're presented, but it feels like a cohesive unit. So that's what we try to do as far as organizing it, something of this, I guess, bulk within a section.
And this is the feature on Seattle, where I lived for 15 years. The waterfront is abuzz again because of conventions and tourism, but one nearly empty mall embodies the struggle to return to normal. The headline, I believe Seattle can be what it used to be, which is certainly interesting. And then this is, I was looking for a caption. I was trying to figure out which movie theater this was, whether it was the one that I was remembering. But I can't place exactly where this is. I'm gonna have to look that up online later.
I just think that photo, while it's in Seattle, could also be representative of another closed movie theater in another downtown in some other part of America. And I think the cool part of this, in that insider piece, the photographers were sent out by the picture editor, Heather Casey, without real specific, I guess, goals. She selected the photographers to shoot in their style. And please shoot in your style, and whatever you feel is right for your photo essay of this city, that's what we'll put online. So it's also giving the photographers a bit of their own voice, rather than directing them specifically to shoot a certain way.
Sure. As a reminder for folks, our guest today is Wayne Kamidoi, art director for the New York Times. We're taking a deep dive into some special sections, and we looked at the evolution of the front page of today's paper. We're going to continue that deep dive. The next section we want to look at is the kids section, New York Times for Kids. Amber Williams is the editor. As I mentioned, she was our guest at the end of June, and we took a close look at the New York Times for Kids. This is the rotten issue. And if you look at below the fold, it's this picture of must be a fly. The reefer's on the bottom, when good kids go bad. Page 3, why America is crumbling. Secrets of the sewer. All the news that's fit to rot. Plus maggots, mayhem, morning breath, and more Halloweeny decay. It's all about things that are rotten. And the editor's note, of course, this section should not be read by grown-ups. The PDF for the New York Times for Kids is available on our website. You can download it. It is available through a special arrangement with the New York Times. This is a print-only special section, so we want to make sure that you check that out. I'm just going to fix the link there for you. If you go to digimentors.group/blog, you'll see the link for today's show. and find the PDF from there. Download it before noon today. As you flip through, you see, some very interesting. The stories are always interesting. They're always very relevant, and they speak to real issues. Emmett Linder, who writes a lot of the insider columns, wrote a piece how journalists expose bad behavior. Um, I don't believe this is a real mugshot from Cook County. They call it Crook County, Illinois. But it's a really excellent way of presenting, kind of adult themed stories for kids. This story on the right hand side, the U.S. is falling apart. They showed, what looks like kind of like a skeleton internal view of a human body, but aging pipes, rusted bridges, and potholed roads by Rick Rojas, who I believe is uh, based in the South, a Southern reporter for the Times. And if you, Wayne, if you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, I think he is based in maybe Texas.
Texas, right? But this is an infrastructure story in the New York Times for kids, which is really, really interesting. Let's see what else. Open up and say, now this is one that is scary for me in particular. This is talking about tooth decay and bacteria. I have really bad dental phobia, so I am not going to spend much time with this page. I don't want to think about what I have coming up at the dentist. But this story, It Takes Guts, by Apurva Tadepalli. This is Iva Inwood Parker, 13, keeps a collection of dead rats in her freezer next to her brother's ice cream. She gets them from a nearby university's research lab. In her spare time, she skins them, neatly removing the skin from their flesh using a tiny surgical scalpel. Certainly rotten. There's a column on funky foods, sauerkraut, Worcestershire sauce, surströmming from Sweden, which we talked about earlier, something from China, chicha. I'll include what's the fruit from Southeast Asia, durian. Certainly should have made this list. Are you familiar with durian, Wayne?
Oh yeah. My oldest had a phase when growing up where I was always going to stores looking for sort of exotic fruits. And then I got my friend Elena at work. She lives in the city, and she would go to Chinatown where you can get some of this. And she would bring it into work and say, hey, why don't you take this home and see what it tastes like? And then we would just share, including durian, jackfruit, different fruits.
Durian apparently tastes good, but smells awful. The article, The Sewer is Full of Secrets. What else? The centerfold is Rotten Peace. This is just a lot of fun with the New York Times for kids. This is when something dies, its body turns into a feeding ground and nursery for new life, all about flesh-eating beetles and mushrooms and scavengers, millipedes, fungi, slime mold. They must have had fun putting this together, both in terms of the content and then obviously the design. Dive into a pit of nasty news plus putrid pranks to bring the grime home. Bug juice, icky leftovers. The problem with plastic, it won't rot. So, taking an environmental angle on this. And here's an article, Museums Fight Time, Mold, and Bugs to Keep History Alive. So some really good, there's some good journalism in here, which I really want to give a shout out. And then Too Many Pumpkins, what happens when Halloween's over? And what happens to pumpkins that are decaying on your stoop? And then there's a detailed look at a fly. So this is still the rotten issue of the New York Times for kids. Again, available on our website until noon today. So go ahead and check that out.
Well, I'll say this quickly about the kids section. It's one of those where you pick it up. I pick it up and you look at it and you say, how did they do that? Because it's such like not only a visual explosion, but it's organized chaos, and somehow they make it this chaotic section, but look very organized and beautiful. And every month, you pick these up and say, like, how did they do that? And I think that's one sign of a successful successful design in my mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to take a moment and give people a heads up on what is on our website. We have features from today's show: the evolution of the front page, a PDF, the downtowns in America, both the PDF and online, the online link. Hurricane Sandy, which we haven't gotten to. We may not have time to hit, Wayne. It's already 9:40. The New York Times for Kids, again, print only, not available online, only available till noon. There's a link to the New York Times Magazine climate issue. And then what I want to spend a little bit of time with you, comparing digital to print, looking at the Portraits of Justice, the online version, and then what you did with the print edition. So we have the PDF for that, the election denier story, and then how a Chinese doctor who warned of COVID spent his final days. So we definitely want to share that. And then if folks go to the website, and all of these will stay online, it's only the kids edition that will come off. But I also want to point out the Society of News Design submissions for news, features, the Capitol riots, and sports. There's a series of cover stories, packages, etc., that just show the breadth of the design work that they're doing at the New York Times. So I certainly encourage you to check that out. I know we won't have time to cover those, but we will definitely give you that preview of the Thanksgiving special. It's not available on our website. You'll only be able to see it here on the show. But if you go to digimentors.group/blog, you will see the link for the show. So I certainly encourage folks to check that out. Let's go ahead and take a look at those online features first, Wayne, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So the first one is the Portraits of Justice. Excuse me. So this is what the New York Times did online. And again, the exercise here, this is how they presented online. We're going to look at what they did in print. If you scroll down, this looks at the series of class photos, if you will, of the Supreme Court, and how it evolved over time, what the protocols are of where people sit. You see how, the various, with this GIF, how people move. Apparently they start in one position, and as they gain seniority, they go to the second row. There's a whole specific approach to that. This is the first photo of the court. And as it goes down, let's see, a portrait in some ways may remind you of a class picture or a family portrait or a t-ball team. And then as you scroll down, they start showing exactly what is going on with these photos. So this portrait of the court in 1939, newer justices stand in the back, senior justices are in the front, and the Chief Justice is always in the center chair. They're positioned according to seniority, but in an alternating pattern. So this is what you can show with the online version, this level of detail. And you can see how William Douglas moved around, how various people moved in different positions. This is Clarence Thomas going from the back left to the middle, to the front row to the right, front row left, and he'll move in closer to the center to his current position there. So this is really interesting, and the website goes on. But let's take a look at what you were able to do with print, Wayne. Well, let's bring up that section and walk us through what we're looking at with this. So this is the wraparound cover. Was this a special section, or this was a part of the A-book?
It was a special section, 4-page pullout within the A section, and it was designed by Andrew Sondern. based on, I'm going to just, Larry Buchanan did the digital.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was one of the two bylines, but Andrew and Larry you get those two guys in the room together, working together. They're geniuses. And, I'm going to guess, and I might be wrong, but Larry probably just saw some photos of these justices posed and probably was just thinking, wow, these photos all kind of look alike. I wonder how that happened. And instead of just dropping it, he has been great over the years of just digging deep and getting all these little details that you go like, wait a minute, this all makes sense. But the amount of time researching this must have been amazing. And so the digital production goes up. We kind of knew about it as it was forming, but it's like, how could this be done in print? And Andrew took it over at some point and, worked with Larry and any other editors who helped with this and say, what can we get in print? How can it be done? And so this is sort of the final version, but as you could see how detailed the digital presentation was, how can you make this look organized and still get across as much, if not all of the information that was in that digital presentation? And I think they got a lot in there.
So I was showing you the wraparound. The kind of the right half is what you would have seen on the front, and this is the back, effectively on the left hand side. But then on the inside 2 pages, this is how they converted what we just saw online. You see the how people swap positions. The Clarence Thomas kind of changing position in different photos on the right hand side. You see that T-ball picture, the numbered positions with that picture on the left. And
I love the photo on the bottom on the right hand page of how they were they had some workers sitting to kind of, this is kind of what we want the picture. They were like framing the shot.
Absolutely. It's really small, but I'm going to zoom in so people can see it and scroll down just a bit. For reference, they included a picture of the Canadian Supreme Court in the bottom right corner. That's what how they dress and what they look like. So it definitely was interesting.
So real quickly, just in a broader sense with these sort of elaborate digital presentations, I mean, what you want to do for print is try to get, the essence of that project across in print. And it's a very difficult and laborious process, but I think the people, because we're digital first, and that's what our publisher said long ago of that's what we wanted to do. And that's true. But what happens is, as soon as that digital production's done, or maybe just as it's coming to a close, there's already a pivot to print. And to take that material and convert it to print can be very time consuming. But what it does give you, we found, is a whole different experience. It's the same content generally, but it's a whole different experience between digital and print. And the digital editors who are really focused on digital actually say after it comes out in print, like, that was great, or that's not what I envisioned for it, or I never envisioned it for print, but we were able to make it work. But they put a lot of work then into the print product, which we're always grateful for. And
sure.
I'm sure this one it's just not taking the screenshots of what's online and plopping it in print. There's a lot of coordination and just, it's putting a new puzzle together.
So here's another example of that. This is a story about election deniers that went online. This is, I mean, we obviously celebrate print and we focus on the print edition, but every now and then there's some really incredible work done online, and we try and highlight that when we can. This is an example of that. I mean, talk about the various media and the way things are popping up. This is just the very beginning of the page. As you scroll down, hundreds of Republican midterm candidates have questioned or spread misinformation. And together they represent a growing consensus in the Republican Party and a potential threat to American democracy. And then you get to a bit of the story, but you get some interesting maps in terms of the color coding. Each dot represents a Republican candidate for Congress, governor, secretary of state, or state attorney general. With the red dots, candidate questioned the 2020 election results. And in 2022, in the pink ones, they questioned it before 2022. And so you scroll down. This is some of the graphics that they were able to use online. Definitely, interesting storytelling. The New York Times graphics department is certainly one of the best. We always like to give them kudos when we can. But then you took this same story and you had to figure out how to put it online. And this is what you did with the front page, at least. So tell me a little bit about this, Wayne.
Well, I mean, as far as timing goes, this obviously had been in the works. It's amazing amounts of data analysis and visualization done by the reporters. I don't know, they spent months doing this, and it's not fun work, and it doesn't look, they're looking at just like raw data and tweets and numbers and spreadsheets that aren't that exciting. And in video, they're going through like hours and hours of video to get the right clip, find the right clip. Is it in the context? Just tons of reporting. And so for print, I see a preview of that as they're working on it, maybe a couple weeks before it's aimed to go in print. And as soon as they hit the button for digital, we wanted that story to actually come out pretty quickly after, even though the amount of work that might go into it. So they were hustling and working simultaneously on print and digital and print before they published it. And it takes a lot of work it's a lot of unwinding. That's kind of what we do is for print, is take the digital and try to unwind it to put it. As I was reading an article by Tom Bodkin was quoted in one of those A2 stories about the print hub and its function. And he said, for print, and whatever Tom says, he's always right, it seems like.
Absolutely.
But he said what we want to present is a coherent experience. But in this case, how chaotic the digital looks, you still want to get a little feel of the chaos and the sort of, when they were showing all those videos and tweets popping up in and out, that's kind of wanted to get that feel in print. So that's that whole black background with some of the key quotes, which I work with the reporters on getting or asking them, hey, what are the best quotes to pull? Because they had a lot more. So they sort of curated it and helped me, create these two sort of sections of the page.
Absolutely. And as a reminder, the PDF that we showed earlier, and also the link to the PDF that we're showing now, and the link to the online version are on our website. You can get there by going to digimentors.group/blog and look for Wayne's show. I want to quickly just share, give people a little bit of a preview of what they'll find when they go to the website and they look at the various PDFs. This one is having a little difficulty loading, but we will go to this one. I think this should sit better. These are the submissions for the Society for News Design. Some of the cover pages, some of the inside pages that you've done. So definitely I encourage folks to take a look at that. This is some of the Capitol riot related pages. Trump incites mob, and this national page with the person hanging from just below the balcony. Just some incredible design work.
That entry just short of for the Capitol riot just shows you the arc that the coverage took.
Yeah.
A lot of these pages, were done on deadline, but it's always comes about planning. How do you plan ahead for this?
Sure.
How do you pinpoint the right stories to display?
And this is my favorite. This look at the cover pages for various newspapers around the world, how they told a story of that chaos. I haven't seen that done in the New York Times before. I know that the museum and others, a Pointer, I think at one point, used to collect front pages of every newspaper every day and do special galleries when there were specific events. But I hadn't seen this in the Times before, so I thought that was really well done. You included Politico as well, not just print newspapers, but Politico is online. I don't believe Politico has a hard
They
copy.
do have a print. They do have
Do
a
they?
print
Oh, I didn't
edition.
realize that. Okay. And then there's a business cover as well that you showed. There are 44 pages in this package. We're not going to go through all of them, but I certainly encourage you to check them out online. As we are coming to a close, we want to give Wayne a little break. Wayne, I'm going to give you a moment. We're going to ask you to share a pro tip for journalists working with designers while we make a few quick announcements, and then we'll come right back. Again, our guest has been Wayne Kamidoi, art director for the New York Times. You can, if you're joining us late, or if you want to go back to watch the show, you'll find the show on the same links that you're watching on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, our Digimentors website. It'll be available shortly after we're done, and you can watch from the very beginning. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, MuckRack. Thank you so much, MuckRack, for all of your support over the years for Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. And of course, the Read Along is produced by Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sri and Andrew Lee co-founded. We produce hybrid and virtual events, do social and digital consulting, and are helping people with podcasts, with recruitment, etc. So if you are looking for someone to help produce an event or do a social media audit or trainings or workshops, we're doing trainings for the UN peacekeeping. Please get in touch. You can reach me at neil@digimentors.group. You can also reach Sri at digimentors.group. If you want us to produce an online show or to do some consulting for you, we'd be happy to do that. Ordinarily, we do show our production team. It's Sri, myself, and Paula Kiger. But sitting in today for Paula is Sonia Grover. And here's an example of the work that Sonia has been doing today, putting in links to various articles in the show. So thank you, Sonia, for all of your work today. And we also want to give a shout out to the Local Connection newsletter. The Local Connection newsletter is brought to you by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University each week. They offer story ideas and pro tips for journalists. Best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. So with that, we'll bring Wayne back up for a pro tip for journalists. And we will end with a special preview of what's to come around Thanksgiving. Wayne, what are your thoughts for journalists as they're working with designers?
Well, I don't know if I was just lucky, fortuitous, or sought it out, but even from the college paper I started at to a weekly paper where it had a staff of one guy, basically the editor who wrote all the stories for it, where I interned, to mid-size paper, small paper, to the New York Times. I mean, one thing I sought out to do was to everywhere, at every stop, there are always smart people who know way more than I did. And those are the people you want to identify and try to be curious about what they do, whether it's, no matter if it's about design, editing, writing, reporting. It's good to be curious about that, because in the end, as far as design, we're sort of toward the end of the process, but we need it to all come together. And as Tom had said, make it a coherent experience. And luckily at the times, I mean, my current colleagues in the print hub, they're great inspiration. Everyone gets better because of other, what others do. We look and see and try to improve. While we did great work today, what can we do better the next day? That's kind of what I try to live by as far as designing or thinking about what the next project's going to be. How can we make it better?
That's great. Thank you very much, Wayne. We appreciate that. Appreciate the shout out to your team. We have certainly enjoyed working with you and Tom Jolly, the print editor. Tom Jolly has been on the show 3 times now. Is always very generous with his time. With you both give us a good heads up on what we can expect in the Sunday paper. So thank you for that. And we've, in particular, really enjoyed our time when we get to join your Print Hub meetings and discuss the paper with you and discuss, how the paper evolves, how certain pages come to be. So thank you.
Well, my great boss, Fred Bierman, will always says you have an open invitation to our meetings.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Definitely would love to visit with you in the next meeting to see how people think about the various sections that we looked at, the New York Times for Kids, the downtown section, Downtowns in America, etc. But as a preview for folks and as a special treat, you're working on a special project for Thanksgiving, right?
Well, we finished it. It's already in. Mike Connors, who you mentioned before, who runs the plan at College Point.
Yes.
We typeset this on Thursday, although it's not going to be in the paper till November 13th, but that's the kind of lead time this section needed because of the special printing and also the distribution of it that needs to happen.
So we're getting an exclusive preview of the New York Times cooking insert for Sunday, November 13th. This is all about pies. Your pies have arrived. Apple, pecan, pumpkin, lemon meringue. They're all here as you've never seen them before. Excuse me. And so this is the inside, the recipes for pies are happiness. Several recipes in here. And then the back... Oh, the back image. This is great.
That is 47 inches wide. So I think those pie pieces will be close to life size, if not bigger.
47 inches wide. So is this a...
It's a pano 8, which will fold out to basically 4 newspaper pages.
So you have 4 newspaper pages on the inside, and you have 1 and 2 pages. Is that 3 pages on the back? What's or is there one more that's
the middle 2 pages there with the recipes? That's what we call this, sort of informally call the saloon doors.
Mm-hmm.
Because
that's right. That's right. It opens like this.
Open up, yeah. And
is that the gatefold?
Out, and on it can be a gatefold or yeah.
That's right.
We just call it the saloon doors because
saloon doors,
two sides open.
But
I want to give shout out before, I worked with Mary Jane Callister, who's the deputy features art director on this, and the cooking team is awesome. I've had the luxury to work with them on several tabloids and other pano 8s, and Kim Guggenheim's the photo editor who sort of orchestrated this photo shoot, which is amazing. And
yeah.
Kristen Schambroch, she's the editor, and Genevieve Coe is an editor, and she developed all 9 of these pies. So we started talking about this in June because we knew it was coming up, and that's how long it takes for her to test these pies, check them out. The whole process is amazing what the cooking team does, and it's always fun it's a great diversion from some of the bad news that we have to put in the A section sometimes.
Absolutely. There you have it, folks. A very special preview of what's to come in a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, November 13th, in the print edition of your Sunday Times. Wayne, again, thank you so much for joining us. Doug Levy said this has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you to the Read Along and Wayne Kamidoi. And Patricia Freudenberg says thank you to Wayne and the entire production team. Awesome interview, insightful conversation. Our friend Rose Horowitz says interesting to hear about the digital first and strategy for print edition. Thank you very much. Miriam Berkeley also says very informative. Again, I want to make sure folks know that all of this content is available on our website. You will be able to get PDFs and links to the online articles right on our website to take a deeper dive into all of this. So thank you again for your time, Wayne. Thank you for all of your support and your insights. I know this was a very special show for our Read Along family, and so glad that you were able to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.